Welcome everybody. I am the air quotes comedian, a man whose entire YouTube channel started off by calling journalists the scum of the earth without ever really explaining why, and this is the polemics. Welcome. Through no fault of my own, I learned that Princess Diana Spencer would roller skate through the corridors and halls of Kensington Palace. I can't decide whether this was an act of naive frivolity on her part, or if it was a display of ostentatious decadence, or maybe even both. I mean, imagine it for a moment, dear viewer. Imagine putting on a pair of roller skates and trying to roller skate around that stinking hovel that you call your home. Yeah, you can't, can you? There's probably not even enough room in there to accommodate a pair of roller skates, is there? Of course, despite my antithetical attitude toward royalty, I'm not here to dump on Diana. Though, given the debauchery of the monarchy, I wouldn't be surprised if they enjoyed that kind of thing. For the life of me, though, I can't get the image of Diana whizzing around Kensington Palace on a pair of roller skates out of my head, and it got me thinking. Perhaps on that fateful day of August 31st, 1997 in Paris, instead of climbing into a car to escape the paparazzi, which is what ultimately led to her death, instead of doing that, perhaps she should have put on a pair of roller skates and then pegged it through one of the pedestrianised zones. The photographers might have tried to give chase, but the accomplished roller skater, Princess Diana Spencer of Wales, would definitely have given them the slip at that time. All the paparazzi would have got was some photographs of her back that was growing ever smaller as she eluded them. I can see the tabloids the next morning, and the reaction of the readers. "Hey, Mr. Johnny Stringvest, they're saying this is a photograph of Lady Di." "Well, Mrs. Josephine Stringvest, it looks like some rando they're trying to pass off as Lady Di as far as I can see. Bit blurry too, she must really be rolling." Anything to flummox the paparazzi. Naturally, it would only work a few times, but at least on that fateful August night in 1997, when Will Smith's Men in Black song was topping the UK charts for some reason. At least on that fateful night, she would have lived to see another day. But the ruse would only have lasted a few times before the paparazzi got wise and invested in roller skates for themselves. The paparazzi, they're not going to be quite as skilled on roller skates as Princess Diana, are they? No, in fact, they'd probably be a bit shit. Roller skating through Knightsbridge, out of breath as they chase Princess Diana through the streets, trying to snap pictures as they hectically wobble their way down the street. Diana probably turns around and skates backwards for a bit, just to show off and annoy them, because every picture they take is garbage. Princess Diana, still alive after that fateful night of August 31st, probably decides to visit Amsterdam. There she is, just about to leave the nightclub. She puts on her roller skates and belts her way through the streets of Amsterdam with the paparazzi in tow. She does a sharp left turn where the street meets the canal, but the paparazzi, still not as experienced on roller skates as Princess Diana, do not make a sharp left turn, and in a moment that wouldn't be out of place on the Benny Hill show, they all end up in the canal. Then, in a moment that would be out of place on a Benny Hill show, they're run over by a barge with an oversized propeller. Good, because that's what they deserve, isn't it? And if this alternative version of history had actually played out, then we wouldn't have had to suffer Elton John's reissue of Candle in the Wind, where he just changed the lyrics a little bit before topping the UK pop charts less than a month later in some insane scheme to shore up his fading stardom. I should give the paparazzi some kudos though. It is, after all, a dangerous job they do. It is though, because sometimes an irate celebrity will put their hand over the lens of the camera, or even snatch the camera and stomp on it, or even punch the photographer in the face. The paparazzi are like suburbanite war journalists, aren't they? I mean, you try doing a job where you might end up inadvertently roller skating into an Amsterdam canal and getting turned into chum. In the grand scheme of things, I don't think the paparazzi are the worst of the chemical toilet that is the mainstream news media. I mean, sure, they had a hand in Princess Diana's death, but the paparazzi aren't on television night after night stirring up murderous outrage or delivering misinformation that could kill you. The very worst offenders are the talking heads on channels like Fox News or GB News or Real America's Nazi Voice or One America's Real Nazi Voice. I mean, when I was a kid in the UK, we used to treat Nazis like we treated ethnic minorities, i.e. not very well. But now we still treat ethnic minorities like absolute shit, but somehow Nigel Farage is a talking head on the television. Listening to anything Nigel Farage has to say is like sucking on an open sewage pipe. It tastes like excrement and it's going to make you violently ill. The best way to listen to Nigel Farage is with the mute button on. How did this Nazi party sock puppet become a staple of British television? It's not just Britain though. Here in the USA things are just as bad, if not worse. At the time of writing, we have right-wing pundits on mainstream television actively discouraging people from taking vaccines during a global pandemic. It makes me question where they source their material from. I've got a good idea where the so-called news sources its material from. Somewhere in the world, possibly behind a Starbucks in Washington, D.C., there's a dumpster. In the dumpster is all the news sources of the English-speaking press. Let's you and I, dear viewer, go dumpster diving. I mean, you're listening to this, so you're practically doing it already anyway. So, we grab a hold of the big plastic flippy lid and throw open the dumpster. There, laying on the top, are documents, accounting forms, memos, the kind of documents that require forensic analysis and corroborating sources to tweeze out a news story. That type of source material, perhaps stained with actual source, it is a dumpster after all, but that type of source is for the proper journalists who actually do the hard graft and legwork to get the story. Your Mint Press News, your ProPublica, Novara Media, Double Down News and the like. The mainstream news outlets aren't interested in that stuff though. We have to dig a little deeper. Beneath the boring documents are the empty takeout cartons and polystyrene coffee cups that represent the government mouthpieces that seek to control the narrative and thus reality itself. That'll do for the likes of CNN, MSNBC and the BBC. Yes, let our sources tell us what the news is. The empty pizza box of the CIA telling us the whys and hows of what's going on. The empty burger box of the US government's press secretary giving us the real scoop as they want us to see it. The likes of CNN, MSNBC and the BBC are not really giving us a proper analysis of the information. It's all about swallowing what the empty takeout cartons and discarded coffee cups have to offer, which is nothing of any nutritional value whatsoever. And that, dear viewer, is why it's a good analogy. But still, some of the mainstream news outlets aren't even interested in the government's mouthpieces, are they? No, especially if the current administration is somebody they pretend to actively dislike in order to make money from their divisive rhetoric. Yeah, we end up with Fox News and OAN, GB News and America's Real Nazi Voice, rooting around the bottom of the dumpster for those maggot-infested truffles of the maniacally insane. Here lies the vermin-infested, rotting food that represent the likes of expert pundits. Why yes, Mr. Fox News presenter, I am indeed an expert on the Middle East, and I'm here to extol the virtues of why the US military should continue to bomb the ever-loving shit out of them, says the expert guest. The bit they don't disclose is that they're only an expert because they were the chairman of the board for an arms manufacturer whose weapons had been sold to the Saudi government, who then sold them on to other terrorist organisations. But not everybody who takes a guest spot on Fox News has a huge conflict of interest that they always forget to mention. No, some are just authoritarian-loving Nazi shitbags who want to stoke fear among the viewers that some brown people might be given a green card. I mean, Tucker Carlson got sued for defamation, right? And his legal defense was that he makes up bullshit from whole cloth and acts as though what he says is factual, but that any reasonable person watching his show should know that it isn't. And the judge ruling on the case agreed. Several points occur to me. First, in what universe could anybody who watches Fox News be referred to as reasonable? I mean, if you were a reasonable person and you were sitting in a waiting room and Fox News was on, you'd either ask for the channel to be changed, or for the television to be turned off, or you'd pull out your pump-action shotgun and shoot the bastard thing. Second, if Tucker Carlson would rather be doing a show more like The Onion, then he really should develop the ability to make what he says funny instead of doing the hateful, bigoted, hypocritical, fear-mongering lies that he does every night on his show. Thirdly, if the legal defense mounted by Tucker Carlson's defense team and accepted by the judge ruling on the case is good enough for them, then, sources tell me, Tucker Carlson was snorting bath salts and taking an arse-fisting from a Hispanic oil rig worker while he jerked off into a Confederate flag. It's absolutely true. It's like breaking news and stuff, and you heard it here first. There are reasons the mainstream news media is the way it is. Now then, before I carry on, I have a confession to make, dear viewer. You see, I had finished writing the script, but I hadn't recorded it yet. I did a read-through and came to the section that should be here and found it to be comedically lacking. It was just over a minute long, and while I'd like to imagine it was integral to the structural integrity of the routine as a whole, it just wasn't. It was a minute's worth of dry facts with a nary a hint of a laugh. I'm going to have another crack at it though. Knock knock. Who's there? 6 companies that wholly own the entire US news media and 6 companies that wholly own the entire US news media and who? 6 companies that wholly own the entire US news media and who also have huge stakes in the arms manufacturing industry. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get the fuck away from the US news media decrying the US withdrawal from Afghanistan, even though the move was enthusiastically lauded by the majority of the public. An Englishman, an Irishman and a Scotsman walk into the newsroom of 6 companies who wholly own the entirety of the US news media. The Englishman asks, how come there's not been any coverage of the coal miners' massive strike from Warrior Met since April 1st, 2021 and is ongoing at the time of writing this joke? The Scotsman asks, how is it that while you covered the Black Lives Matter protests this summer, which have multiple academic studies that prove that they were 95% peaceful, you made it look like they were terrorist agitators deserving of a nice big helping of police brutality? The Irishman asks, given your deep ties to arms manufacturers and your penchant for reporting on the wars that utilise the fruits of those death merchants, shouldn't the only war you report on be your own conflict of interest? Then the Englishman, Irishman and Scotsman smiled as a lighting rig fell down and smashed Tucker Carlson's skull in. Didn't kill him though, so the lighting rig pulled itself up and fell down again, completely caving his fucking head in. I think, dear viewer, Tucker Carlson has been in the spotlight for too long in this episode of The Polemics, so I decided to put the spotlight in him. Alright, I know all of that was absolutely shit, but what it replaced was worse. The last line of the original bit was, 6 companies writing the narrative to keep us all divided and fearful so that we just keep running on the hamster wheel of alienation while generating profit for our corporate overlords. See, I told you. If you're an old fart like I am, you may vaguely recall a news magnate by the name of Robert Maxwell of the Mirror newspaper group. He looted the pension fund of his employees and then fell overboard off his yacht while naked and taking a wee. Or did he? Perhaps he got a helpful shove. Either way, I don't care how he died exactly. I'm only glad that he did. I only hope that as he fell from his yacht, he somehow managed to get some wee in his mouth before he hit the water. And I know it's not much of a solution to the problem of a monolithic media machine that manipulates how we perceive the world through the news we consume, but I'd like to gather up the news media CEOs, their sock puppet journalists, the editors, the talking head pundits, all of them, slap some roller skates on them and then push them off a fucking cliff. I'd stand there with a shit-eating grin on my face while I watched them hit the water, their bodies splitting open as if made from balloons stuffed with offal. Given the misinformation, outright lies, collaboration with interests that are directly opposed to society's own, and the endless seizure-inducing graphics they choose to use on their visual medium, it's the very least that should be done with them. Slap some roller skates on them and shove them off a cliff. That's a news story I could get behind. That's the end of this episode of The Polemics. Be sure to hit the dislike button before loading up your pump-action shotgun. Those televisions aren't going to shoot themselves, you know.